If you remember last week, I preached about trusting in God. Do we really trust that God knows best for us? And of course we should, because He is God and He is smarter than us. And today I would like to continue that theme, especially with putting our faith and our trust in God. And we have a perfect example, actually two perfect examples about this today that we hear about in our first reading. Of course, the story of Abraham and Sarah. And now they're put to the test over and over and over again. Of course, we know in the beginning, Abraham sometimes failed. He would not always put his trust in God. He thought that he knew better. But in those cases, the results weren't good. But when he started to put his trust in God and listening to Him, the results would be better than he could ever imagine. And of course, one of the promises that God made to Abraham was that you will have more descendants than the stars of the sky. But there was a problem with this. We know that Sarah was barren. And Sarah desired to have a child, but she also desired for Abraham to have the gift of a child, and she thought she could not provide for it. So she told Abraham to take her servant, Hagar, and have a child with her. And sure enough, Abraham does this, but God says, no, I will provide you a child with Sarah. There will be many descendants from this. And sure enough, we hear about this in our first reading today. The angels appear and say, when we visit next year at this time, you will have a son. And sure enough, a year later, they have a son, Isaac. But God is not done testing them. We know when Isaac grows up, what does God say to Abraham? Take your only son up the mountain and offer him up as a sacrifice to me. Imagine, your only son, one that you've been longing for, one that came as a miracle, offering him up as a sacrifice. And sure enough, Abraham goes up that mountain and Isaac says, Father, where is the sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide. And sure enough, Abraham is about to offer up his son as a sacrifice. And God says, Abraham, stop. I will offer up the sacrifice. I will offer up my own son. And of course, we know that he does this, Jesus, on the cross. But it's not only Abraham who would have put his faith in God, Sarah did as well. You see, when the angels appeared today, we hear about, a little couple verses later, it says, when Sarah heard that she was going to give a child, she laughed. Because she said, who, me? I'm barren. Who, me? I'm too old. And she laughed. Of course, the angels called her out on this, and she says, oh, no, I put my trust in God, right? We do this sometimes too, but she's open to whatever God wills for her. And God provided for her the child that she had been longing for. And Abraham and Sarah were open to this, and they put their faith in God and their trust. We too are called to put our faith and trust in God, especially with the many gifts that He wants to give us, including the gift of children. We should always be open to God's plan, not to our own plan. This week, you may know, is Natural Family Planning Awareness Week. And I praise God that the last 16 years, you have had a pastor and Father Dosh who has preached the truth that the Catholic Church has. It's amazing that I can walk in here and not be as nervous as I would be in other parishes speaking about this. I'm still a little bit nervous, of course, because, well, it can be a controversial subject. But it really shouldn't be. And why not? Because it's a gift that God has given us. And although Father Dosh has been here for the last 16 years, I know, I'm not naive, that not every single person here agrees with the Church's teaching on natural family planning. Now, am I going to convince you today to switch tonight? Probably not. What I hope to do, what God hopes to do, is to continue to open up your hearts and explore why maybe we're afraid of this great gift that God has given us. You see, as I mentioned, children are a gift. Anyone that has a child knows this. They may cause some stress in your life, a lot of tears, and more than just a little, a lot. I know I did for my parents, but there's still a gift from God. And what natural family planning does is it has a husband and wife come together with God and saying, God, this is our plan, but you may laugh at it, and we're not going to impede on your plan. We're not going to block your plan. We're open to whatever you will. Of course, this great NFP can be used to have children. And it also can be used to say, maybe not this month. But in saying maybe not this month or this year, you're still saying, God, but if you have a plan, we'll let it happen. Because you know more than we do. Because God is smarter than us. No one argues with that. And that we know that God will always provide for us. So it comes down to this question. Do we truly believe that God will provide for us? Do we truly believe that He knows better than we do? And with natural family planning, what you're able to do is to say, yes, we do. Is it challenging sometimes? Of course it is. Are there sacrifices? Yes. But is it worth it? Yes. Why? Because you're letting God be the one who dictates what happens in your life. You're letting His will be done, not our own. Of course, maybe it causes some anxiety or some stress, saying, will God really provide for us? I'd like to share a quick story with you about my grandma and my grandpa. They both were born during the Great Depression. They met right before World War II, and Clarence got sent over. But they met right before, so they exchanged letters throughout the war. And when they got back, of course, they got married. And they wanted to have a child right away, so they did. They had a child right away, and that was my mom, Pauline. But then Genevieve got pregnant again. They didn't have much money. They had just bought a farm, and she was extremely worried. And so she went down to Clarence. And my grandpa Clarence didn't speak very often, but when he did, you wanted to listen. She went down to Clarence and says, Clarence, I'm pregnant. We have no money. What are we going to do? And Clarence simply looked at Genevieve and said, Genevieve, if God would not provide for this child, He would not let us have it. God will provide. Genevieve went down to Clarence over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every single time that she was pregnant, all 9 children. Every single time. And every single time, it wasn't like they're financially secure. It wasn't like she wasn't stressed out. But Clarence would simply look at her and say, Genevieve, God will provide. Do we trust that? Do we trust that God will give us everything we need? Maybe not the biggest house. Maybe not even the best education sometimes. Will He give us the basic necessities to bring children up in the world to know Him and to love Him? Of course, today we hear about someone who's very anxious. Martha, who goes to Jesus, imagine ratting out your own sister in front of the Lord. Lord, tell her to do something. I'm sick of this. And what does Jesus say? Martha, Martha, you're anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing, and Mary has chosen the better part. And what is that one thing? Put your trust in the Lord. Listen to what He wants of you. Choose the better part. Of course, Sarah laughed when she heard God's plan. And sometimes you will cry when you hear God's plan for you, when you're pregnant and maybe you weren't expecting it. But it's something that God will provide for you. For those of you who are practicing NFP right now, thank you. Thank you for putting your trust in God. Know of the prayers that I will give to you and some of the sacrifices you have to offer. But I also ask you to share this good news, this great gift that God has given us with your friends, to talk about it openly, not maybe openly, but with the friends that you have, and let them know how great it's helped out your marriage, that you and your spouse are communicating every single month. For those of you who maybe have struggled with NFP, tried it and said it doesn't work, re-examine it. Re-examine and say, God, give us the trust, the faith that we need to put in you. And for those of you couples right now who are not practicing natural family planning, all I ask of you is to bring it to prayer and to say, God, what is your will for us? Why are we so afraid? Can we put our trust in you? And to pray together. Once again, I'm not expecting everyone to change today, but hopefully a gradual change and putting our trust in God. Of course, for those who no longer would be in need of practicing natural family planning, please pray and promote it as well. Once again, God has so much in store for us. He gives us everything that we need. He will provide for us. But it's up to us. What are we going to choose? Are we going to be like Martha and be worried and anxious about many things? Or are we going to be like Mary and choose the better part? I pray that you will choose the better part.